Hi friends and plant lovers! Thank you so much for joining me today. It is August 1st, so it's really time to start planting for our fall crops this year. This is the first time I am attempting a fall harvest, so this is an experiment for me. I hope you will come and join me. I am planting beets today because beets are the fall plant that take the longest to mature. When you're planting for a fall harvest, you want to make sure that you know how long it takes for the plant to be ready so that you can work backwards and figure out when you need to plant it. Beets are okay in a light frost, so if you don't plant them now, you still have a week or two to get them in the ground. I am planning on harvesting these around mid-October, so that'll give about 2.5 months for them to sprout and mature. Today I will be planting the beets in a small area of compost that I installed above the ground. I am making most of my garden no dig, so these will be the ones that I'm planting from seed for the first time in compost versus in the ground, which is how I had to plant them in the spring. And for the next part, I have to switch to voiceover because some neighbors are having construction done and they are playing the radio. So I really don't want to get in trouble for possible copyright violations because you could definitely hear it in the garden. And here we are. As you can see, I have this yardstick that I will be using to very easily set up the rows where I will plant the beets. If you don't have a yardstick, you can use a dowel or any sort of other stick that you can find to help separate the rows. And I'm measuring it roughly 6 inches apart. You really don't need to place beets 12 inches apart like they say on the package, and especially in a small space like this, it's really ideal to plant things as close as you can without compromising the quality of the plants. Now that this part is done, I will go ahead and grab my beet seeds. I tried to show them to you, but the saturation and light exposure was too much, so that'll have to wait for another time. The beet seeds are really small, and they look a lot like soil, so you just want to make sure that you handle them very carefully, otherwise they will spill out everywhere. As you can see, I'm just spreading them out a little bit, roughly an inch or so apart. You don't need to be really accurate with this. As long as they're in a row, then you'll be able to tell exactly where they are. And let's speed up the rest of the process so you don't have to watch me plant the entire 4 rows. It would be a really boring video if you did. And right now I'm just lightly covering them up so they can be all in contact with the soil and continue to grow. The very next step is probably the most important part after planting the seedlings, and that is watering. You really have to make sure that you soak this really, really well. When I first did it, I had my watering can and I used about 4 or 6 gallons, and then it still wasn't soaking into the base of the soil, so I brought out my hose and really, really doused it, which is what you will see in the very next clip. What I'm doing now is very much an optional step. This compost is very loose and full of some fine wood grains, so I am putting cardboard on top to help preserve the soil here. It actually rained the night after I did this, so that will prevent the seeds from washing away. I'm only going to leave this here for a week. After a week, I'll take it off because at that point the seeds should have mostly sprouted and will have already started putting roots into the soil. You don't want to keep this on here more than a week though. And right after this, I'm back. Everything is done for the planting portion of today, and I thought I would show you what beets will look like in 2.5 months or so, roughly mid-October here. And here are the beets now. My tomatoes are growing into them, so it's kind of hard to tell what's what. But if you go down in here, you can see that they are fairly mature. These aren't as big as I would like, so let's see if I can find. Well, here's one. The grass is kind of growing over it, but if you look down, see right, it's kind of an adventure, right down here. You can see that there's a beet right here and there's another one right here. And I found one that is actually ready to pick. It's right down here. As you can see, it's about halfway up out of the ground, and the one next to it is a lot smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy out to show you what it looks like when it's mature. Oh yeah, that came right out. It's ready to go. This one isn't very large, but it's a really good size for eating. I'm going to roast this in the oven tonight because that's my favorite way to have them. They taste a lot like candy. And you can actually use the beet tops as well. Believe it or not, beets are related to Swiss chard, which I have right over here. And this is the chard. It's about 18 inches tall, and you can see the resemblance here. Here are the beet greens, here are the chard greens. If you didn't have the beetroot right here, you really wouldn't know the difference. So I might pick some of this as well and see what I can do with it. This is my bed that I worked up using the native soil in our backyard. I really didn't do too much tilling here beyond a hand fork because I didn't want to disturb the soil as much. The only downside is that it's a lot harder for beets and other root vegetables to grow in a more compacted soil. The ones I just planted are in compost, and I expect those to grow a lot faster and get a lot larger than these. As you can see, these are still growing. They are just really, really slow. And you actually don't have to separate them. As you can see down here, these are growing next to each other and they're still getting larger. What they will do is they'll just continue to kind of grow out and push each other away. So you don't really have to worry too much about space when you're planting beets. That's something I learned this year, and it's proving to be true in this garden. Let's see what this one over here looks like. Oh, yeah, that's about out too. It's actually leaning over, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick this guy too. It's a little smaller. Not too happy with the size of these, but I attribute that to the soil I have over here. Come on, get on out of here. This is what happens in a compact garden when you want to save as much space as possible. Things end up growing together and creating kind of a mess. But this tomato is just gonna be just fine. And I don't really need to eat these greens. So here's that one that'll join the friend over here. You can see it's a little bit smaller, but they're roughly the size that you want when you eat them. If they get really large, they tend to get kind of woody, so they're a little bit harder to eat. But I will enjoy these tonight very much. I just realized that I did not film an outro for this video. So while you watch me look for some more beets, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this inspires you to plant something before the winter comes. You still have a little bit more time, so don't be afraid to try something new. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.